So Megan is going to be speaking to us today about our cultural potential, our extraterrestrial cultural potential. She's titled her talk, Three Mars Missions and the Galactic Species. Megan Dobrodt.
In February 2021, three heavenly visitors descended on Mars. One, a rover with a helicopter on board, another, an orbiter-lander pair, and the third, an orbiter which will study the Martian atmosphere. These three visitors, sent by the United States, China, and the United Arab Emirates, respectively, are humanity's emissaries, our robotic representatives, which extend the human sensory apparatus to another world. To say a few things about each of these missions, NASA's Perseverance rover landed in Jezero Crater, which billions of years ago may have been a lake about the size of Lake Tahoe. Perseverance has a mission of searching for signs of past microbial life, preparing samples for a future sample return mission, perhaps by the end of the decade, creating breathable oxygen from in situ resources, and flying the first helicopter on another planet. China's Tianwen-1 orbiter will study, among other things, Mars's topography and geological structure, the characteristics of the Martian soil and groundwater distribution, and, in a couple of months, the orbiter will release a lander and rover to the surface and will make China the first nation to attempt an orbiter and a lander in its first Mars mission. The HOPE orbiter of the UAE, whose space agency is just 6 years old, will study the atmosphere from top to bottom for at least one Martian year, including its composition, temperature, and weather, becoming thus Mars's first weather satellite. While these three missions come out of national space programs, each in various stages of development, all of them will perform important work over the next months and years, which will contribute new knowledge, new discoveries to benefit all of humanity. Now, while all of this is occurring millions of kilometers off of the Earth, it might just be the most important thing going on the Earth. As was stated quite beautifully by the chair of the UAE Space Agency, 33-year-old Sarah Al-Amiri, the Emirates Mars mission has inspired the nation to look to the future and look to the skies. It has shown that collaboration across nations, geographies, creeds, in the face of remarkable challenges, can forge brilliant outcomes for the benefit of us all. So this brings us to why humanity's activity in space is an appropriate topic for a discussion of a Renaissance culture on Earth. Now, in one sense, perhaps it's obvious that a successful culture would be pursuing the frontiers of science, of technology, for the benefit of its population. Yes, that's true. But there's something deeper. There's a cultural aspect to this, which goes very deep into the consequences for humanity's future. How will space exploration change mankind? How will it change our role in the solar system, in the universe at large? Therefore, how will it change our identity as a species of life? Croft Erica, who was a great technological and philosophical mind, a good friend of Lyndon and Helga LaRouche, and also a member of the advisory board of the Schiller Institute, spent many decades contemplating this question. On the one hand, Croft Erica designed in great detail the steps that mankind must take in order to build up the infrastructure to live and work on the moon. He designed a city on the moon called Selenopolis, with its accompanying fusion power plants and industrial operations. And he also imagined a distant, though foreseeable future when humanity might have developed million-person satellite cities, which he called astropolis, each with its own unique orbit like a planet, which, he said, eventually would have the ability to set off on multi-generational journeys beyond the solar system to other galaxies. In all of this, Erica asked not only how would humanity change and alter the moon, asteroids, Mars, but how would our becoming an extraterrestrial species change mankind? For example, what would be the national identity of the first person born on the moon? How would he or she relate to the cultures of Earth? How would such a child see the role of the human mind in the universe as we bring life to other planets? In a 1957 article called The Anthropology of Astronautics, Erica wrote the following: "The idea of traveling to other celestial bodies reflects to the highest degree the independence and agility of the human mind. It lends ultimate dignity to man's technical and scientific endeavors. Above all, it touches on the philosophy of his very existence. As a result, the concept of space travel disregards national borders, refuses to recognize the differences of historical or ethnological origin, and penetrates the fiber of one sociological or political creed as fast as that of the next. Because of this, space travel holds perhaps the greatest general appeal for our complex and divided world. It seems to promise less immediate material gain than atomic technology. Yet, or perhaps therefore, its spiritual appeal is extremely powerful, symbolizing as it does that man, after all, has not yet lost his capability of cutting the Gordian knot, of exploding old notions which retard his development, and of overcoming seemingly invincible physical obstacles. If it can be done here, it can eventually also be done in other segments of our life today, where man seems to be hopelessly and perpetually deadlocked." Lyndon LaRouche, another great scientific and philosophical genius, wrote and spoke for many decades about the necessity for a 40-year mission for the colonization of the moon and Mars. And he made such a program the centerpiece of his 1988 presidential campaign. Many years later, in the midst of recruiting a new generation of youth, LaRouche wrote a paper called The Principle of Power. This paper takes up the need to rise above the decadent, reductionist culture which had come to dominate science in the West, and to forge a new notion of the human identity, not based on sense perception, but based on the power of the human mind in and over the universe. LaRouche ends that writing with the following charge: "We must change the image of man from the relatively poor conception prevalent today to a notion of man in the image of the Creator. Mankind with a mission in the universe, a mission in which persons should enjoy the right of a sense of participation in this great universal mission. We require sovereign states because that is the only way in which the effective cultural development of the new individual can occur. But we are otherwise one species with one unifying mission for all time to come. We must reflect that imparted sense of personal identity in each sovereign individual person. We must look upward to space so that we are impelled, even within our daily missions, to see ourselves and one another in a better way than mankind generally has seen mankind in the past. So, where will we go from here? One of the most beautiful aspects of the 3 current Mars missions, as with most other space missions underway, is that they are distinctly international in character. All of them were collaborative efforts of many nations. This month, Russia and China announced an agreement to build a base at the south pole of the moon. The United States plans to launch and land people on the moon again within the decade. China will launch its space station later this spring and has plans for manned landings on the moon and Mars in the coming decades. The UAE has announced back in 2017 that they will colonize Mars by 2117. We can and absolutely should be proud of this year's accomplishments at Mars. But compared to where we could have been if Mr. LaRouche's vision had been followed, in a sense, we've been treading water for many decades now, not because of technological obstacles. Those either have or can be overcome, but because of spiritual deficiencies, a cultural degeneracy in the West especially. We've almost lost a sense of what Lyndon LaRouche and Croft Erica pointed to as the goodness of human creativity in our universe. So I suggest that we take Lyndon LaRouche's advice and look upward to space so that we are impelled, even within our daily missions, to see ourselves and one another in a better way than mankind generally has seen mankind in the past.